Welcome to the deep dive. Today, well, Damien Hirst. We're going to do a deep dive on him.
Oh, yeah.
This guy,
This should be good.
you know the one, right?
Yeah.
Shark and formaldehyde.
The shark. Yeah.
So is he a genius? Is he a
Yeah.
con man? What is the deal with Damien Hirst?
Yeah. Is he like an evil genius?
Yeah.
Or just a genius?
I don't know. Maybe both.
Maybe.
We've got some excerpts from a biography about him.
Okay.
Let's dive in.
Sounds good.
So,
What's so interesting about Hearst, I think, at least to me,
yeah?
is that he came up in a time where the lines between art and celebrity and commerce were really starting to blur.
Yeah.
And he's like right in the middle of that.
He really is. He's not just creating art. He's creating a spectacle, a brand.
It's true, yeah.
It's the whole, yeah.
So let's rewind a little bit. Okay, back to the beginning. His early life. Did anything in his childhood kind of point to the artist he would become? Well, let's see. He was born in Bristol in 1965, but he mainly grew up in Leeds with his mom after his parents' divorce.
Okay.
And even early on, you see this rebellious streak. Like, he was arrested twice for shoplifting as a teenager.
Oh, wow. Okay, so not exactly a model student.
Not quite, yeah.
So how do we get from, shoplifting to this art world,
Yeah.
phenomenon?
Well, he always had this passion for art, even if it wasn't always super obvious. And his teen years were right when punk was exploding in the UK.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The Sex Pistols, all that,
Yeah.
like that anti-establishment energy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It really got under his skin.
Oh, you know what's funny? I was reading that his mom actually melted one of his Sex Pistols records.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She turned it into a fruit bowl.
Really?
I guess even punks have to eat, right?
I guess so.
But you see that same spirit, that rebellious spirit in Hearst's work. It's all about challenging norms, provoking reactions.
Right. So, okay. This rebellious kid ends up at Goldsmiths, one of the most prestigious art schools in the UK.
Yeah.
But didn't he get rejected at first?
He did, yeah. First application rejected. But he was persistent. He got in eventually.
Oh, wow.
And it's at Goldsmiths that he really starts to make a name for himself, putting on student exhibitions, immersing himself in this emerging young British artist scene.
Right.
But there's this other really interesting piece of the puzzle here.
Okay.
During summer breaks, he took a job at a mortuary.
A mortuary. Okay, now some of his more macabre pieces are making a little more sense.
Exactly. It's like this formative experience that you can see foreshadowing so much of his later work.
Yeah.
Surrounded by death, decay, the fragility of life. These themes become central to his art.
Right, yeah.
And not just thematically, Working in a mortuary gave him this practical knowledge about preservation techniques, which he would later use in pieces like, the physical impossibility of death in the mind of someone living. The shark and formaldehyde.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have got this fascinating blend of punk rock rebellion, a fascination with death, and now he's at the heart of the YBA movement. And this is where Freeze comes in, right? That legendary exhibition he put on.
Freeze was a game changer, not just for Hearst, but for British art in general.
Yeah.
This wasn't just another student show, right? It was held in this rundown warehouse in the London Docklands.
Wow.
Hearst and his fellow students, people like Fiona Ray and Sarah Lucas, they were deliberately rejecting the traditional art world, They were creating their own space.
So it sounds like it was more of a happening than an exhibition.
Absolutely.
Did it get much attention at the time?
Oh, yeah. It was buzzing. Word got around, and some very important people showed up. Norman Rosenthal from the Royal Academy, Nicholas Sirota from the Tate, and this is key, Charles Saatchi.
Saatchi? Wasn't he like the kingmaker of the art world back then?
Absolutely. And he was immediately drawn to Hearst's work, that audacity, that willingness to shock.
Right.
Saatchi became Hearst's patron, funding his increasingly ambitious projects.
Wow.
It all kind of culminated in 1992, which was a breakout year for Hearst. He created The Physical Impossibility of Death, the shark.
Right.
And that piece earned him a Turner Prize nomination.
The Turner Prize, that's a huge deal, right?
It's like the Oscars of the British art world.
Oh, wow.
Winning it can launch an artist's career. But even just being nominated puts you on the map.
Yeah.
So even though Hearst didn't win that year, it was a turning point.
Okay.
He was now a major figure in contemporary art, and his reputation for controversy was firmly established.
Yeah. And that seems to be a defining characteristic of his career, right? He's constantly pushing buttons, making people uncomfortable.
Right. And he wasn't afraid to push boundaries. even if it meant, courting outrage. Two Fucking and Two Watching in 1995. The one with the rotting cow and bull caused quite a stir. It even got banned in New York over public health concerns.
I can see why.
Yeah.
Some people probably found it a little too realistic.
Yeah.
But all this shock value, did it translate into critical acclaim? Or was it just, shock for shock's sake?
That's the thing with Hearst. He's polarizing.
Yeah.
Some critics dismissed him as a shock jock, more interested in headlines than artistic depth.
Right.
Others saw him as a genuine innovator, someone who was challenging the very definition of art and forcing us to confront these uncomfortable truths about life and death.
So it wasn't just about shock for shock's sake. There was a deeper artistic statement there, at least for some people.
Absolutely. And you have to remember, this was the 90s, the era of Britpop,
Okay.
Cool Britannia.
Right.
Art was becoming more and more intertwined with pop culture, with celebrity.
Yeah.
And Hearst, with his, outrageous personality and talent for self-promotion, he was perfectly positioned to ride that wave.
So he was more than just an artist. He was a cultural phenomenon.
Exactly. He directed music videos for bands like Blur. He was constantly in the tabloids. He became a celebrity in his own right.
Wow.
And that celebrity fueled his art and vice versa. It was all part of the Damien Hirst package.
It sounds like he was really playing the game, blurring the lines between art star and rock star.
He was a master of the game. But even with all the success, things weren't always smooth sailing. His relationship with his patron, Charles Saatchi, eventually soured.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, in 2003, they had this very public falling out, with Hearst unhappy about how Saatchi was presenting his work.
Oh, interesting. So Hearst wanted to kind of maintain control over his art, even with Saatchi backing him?
Oh, absolutely. He even bought some of his pieces back from Saatchi. There's this great quote where Hearst says he's not Saatchi's barrel organ monkey.
Oh, wow.
Meaning, he wasn't just going to churn out work to please a patron.
That's a statement. So how did Hearst navigate the art world after splitting with someone as powerful as Saatchi?
Well, it's a testament to Hearst's business acumen that he not only survived, but thrived. In 2008, he held that record-breaking Sotheby's auction, Beautiful Inside My Head Forever, where he sold works directly from his studio, completely bypassing the traditional gallery system.
Wow.
And it netted him over 70 million pounds.
That's an incredible amount of money.
Hmm.
But even with the financial success, his artistic output continued to divide critics. Some called his later paintings, particularly these spot paintings, dull and even amateurish. How do you explain that shift in perception?
Well, there's always been this tension in Hearst's work, right, between artistic expression and commercialism.
Yeah.
And the spot paintings, which were often produced by assistants following Hearst's instructions, really brought that tension to the forefront. They raised these interesting questions about authorship and originality. Like, if Hearst isn't physically creating the work, can it still be considered his art?
So it's more about the concept, the idea behind the work, rather than the physical execution.
That's the argument some make. And Hearst himself has even acknowledged the role of assistants, praising their skill, comparing his studio to Andy Warhol's factory.
Oh, interesting.
But for some critics, it felt like a step too far. More about mass production and branding than artistic integrity.
I see. It's interesting how he's branched out into other ventures, too. Restaurants, a gallery showcasing his personal collection, even a store selling limited edition art pieces. It's almost like he's built this Damien Hirst empire.
He's a brilliant entrepreneur, there's no doubt, but that entrepreneurial spirit, it's always been there. Think back to Freeze. He had to hustle to get that show off the ground, finding a space, promoting it, navigating the art world's power structures.
Right.
That drive just scaled up along with his success.
So where does this leave us in terms of Hirst's legacy? Is he a true artistic innovator, a brilliant businessman, or a bit of both?
Well, Hirst's impact on contemporary art is undeniable. He's inspired a generation of artists, challenged the status quo, and pushed the boundaries of what art can be, blurring the lines between art and commerce in a way that was both groundbreaking and controversial.
Yeah.
He's forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about the art market, about celebrity culture, and about the very nature of creativity.
He's definitely a complex figure who evokes strong reactions, both positive and negative.
And that's what makes him so fascinating. He's not just creating art, he's generating dialogue and debate around it. He's making us think.
That diamond-encrusted skull, for the love of God, that was another one that really got people talking.
Oh, yeah. That piece, with its exorbitant price tag and blatant celebration of wealth, really provoked some interesting artistic responses, like Laura Keeble's Forgotten Something. That photo of a replica skull discarded in the trash was a powerful commentary on the perceived excess and wastefulness of Hirst's work.
Right. And then there was Eugeo Marino's For the Love of Gold, the sculpture of Hirst shooting himself in the head.
Yeah.
That's quite a statement.
Marino claimed it was both a tribute and a critique, suggesting that Hirst's obsession with money might ultimately be self-destructive. It highlights this ongoing debate. Is Hirst a true artist driven by creative impulses, or is he simply manipulating the market for his own gain?
It seems like other artists have been both inspired and repulsed by Hirst's work.
He's definitely been influential, whether people agree with his methods or not, and that's the mark of a truly significant artist, right? Someone who sparks conversation,
Right.
who pushes the boundaries, who forces us to re-examine our assumptions about art and the world around us.
So after this deep dive into the world of Damien Hirst, are we any closer to answering that initial question? Is he a genius or a con man?
Well, I think the answer is far more nuanced than a simple either. Hirst is a complicated figure, a talented artist, a brilliant businessman, a provocateur, a master of self-promotion. He's challenged conventions, pushed boundaries, and forced us to think critically about the art world and its relationship with money, celebrity, and spectacle.
He seemed like he embodies the contradictions of our time.
He does, and that's why he continues to fascinate us, even decades after he first burst onto the scene.
It's like he threw a grenade into the art world, and we're still trying to figure out what exploded.
Yeah, he definitely shook things up, and I think whether you admire his work or find it repulsive, you can't deny the impact he's had.
So what's the one thing you think our listeners should take away from this whole Hirst deep dive?
I think the main takeaway is that art doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It's always interacting with like the social, cultural, and economic currents of its time. And Hearst understood that. He was a master at tapping into those currents, even manipulating them to his advantage.
He was very much a product of his time, that late 20th century obsession with celebrity, spectacle, and kind of blurring the lines between art and commerce.
Exactly. And he kind of forced us to confront some uncomfortable questions about those trends, too. Like, what does it mean for art when it becomes so intertwined with money and fame?
Right. So to wrap things up here, after all this, do you think Hearst is a genius or a con man? Or maybe, as you said before, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, I think reducing him to either label really misses the point. Hearst is undeniably talented. He's got a keen eye for the provocative and a brilliant business mind. Whether his work has, like, lasting artistic merit, it's a question that'll continue to be debated for years to come. And ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide, you know?
So if someone wants to understand Damien Hirst, what should they do? Should they just go look at a bunch of pictures of dead animals and diamond skulls?
Well, looking at the art is essential, of course, but I think go beyond just the surface shock value. Think about the context, the questions he's raising, about life, death, consumerism, even the art market itself. Read the criticisms, explore the controversies, and come to your own conclusions.
I think that's great advice. I think this deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
Me too.
Hearst is a complex figure, and he forces us to confront some big questions about art and the world we live in. So thanks for helping us unpack all of this.
It's been my pleasure. He's definitely a figure worth grappling with.
And for our listeners out there, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Damien Hirst. It's just a starting point. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those deep dives going. See ya.